Hello and welcome to another video. Now, I had a request come in from my last video for Lithuanian food at the beginning of April for Virtu, Bulviu Cepelinai, which are a boiled potato zeppelin, made very different from the kinds of zeppelins we've made before. So the method of cooking is quite different, and the ingredients are slightly different as a result. Now, boiled potato zeppelins are distinct because all of the potatoes that we use is pre-boiled, and then we mix basically the mashed boiled potato with starch and the egg to form the main dough. These cannot be cooked as long as normal zeppelini, so consequently the fillings are usually ones which don't require a lot of heavy cooking. So you can use meat fillings, but then you pre-cook the meat, or you can use, as we'll do today, a curd filling. So this is great. Another really interesting point about this particular type of zeppelin is that because the potatoes are pre-boiled, it doesn't require vitamin C to hold the white color. So what I'm going to do today is, because of issues scaling the recipe, I'm just going to make a whole bunch of them, and then I'm going to put them in the refrigerator, and I can cook them throughout the week, and they will, they should be just as delicious that way as they are today. So, we have, for ingredients, we have 900 grams of potatoes. I have a little more because they're older potatoes and just want to be sure. I have 1 egg. This is the scaling limit of the recipe, but again, this doesn't have the same problem that you do typically with like traditional cepelinai, in the sense that they can be made well ahead of time and then cooked. The filling, I will use a creamy fresh cheese, found one with 25% fat, fattiest one I could find actually. And I'll mix that with an egg and some salt. For the sauce, we will use milk, starch, onion, and mushrooms. And we'll have a lot of starch that will go into the dough for the zeppelins as well. And I will do the frying with butter schmaltz as clarified butter, just simply because vegetable oil is a little difficult to get right now. I have some vegetable oil, but given the current realities, I figure it might as well be worth showing people how to cook with alternatives. And speaking of alternatives, this sort of the Lithuanian dishes that are potato-centric, and I'll do a bunch of German-centric potato dishes shortly too, are really interesting right now when people are having trouble getting, say, wheat flour. Yeah, I still have a little bit of wheat flour left, but I'd rather not use it if I can avoid it. So consequently, you can make a lot of really interesting dishes with potatoes with only a little bit or no wheat flour at all, and consequently, knowing how to work with potatoes can be really handy when, you know, certain staples that we're used to working with are just simply unavailable. So, all that said, let's go ahead and get started. I will be back actually after I finish boiling the potatoes. So we're just going to boil them in water, and then we'll be back. So the potatoes are boiling. I've measured out 130 grams of the curd, and basically of the cream cheese, and into this I'm going to add an egg and basically salt it to taste. Doesn't really require a lot of salt, but keep in mind, you know, things will get cooked. You want the salt to settle into things, so add some salt here. And then I'm going to stir it together with a fork. So this mixture will now be beaten together. And it's worth noting here that, oh boy, this is going to be this looks like it will become kind of more of a batter. So, There we go. Now, if we have trouble working with this, I suppose we could probably heat it up so that it solidifies a bit. But part of the goal here is that this will solidify as it cooks. So we'll form these Zeppelins sort of as hollow, and we'll kind of fill them with this. So I have decided that this is just a little bit thin, so I'm adding a bit more of the cream cheese. So maybe instead of 130 grams, maybe like 180 grams or something. And then we'll go ahead and mix this together. However, as you'll note, it is thickening up a little bit. So that is good. And so as we let this sit, this is a good reason to do this while the potatoes are cooking, because as we let this sit, it may thicken up a little bit more. Yeah, this is looking a lot easier to work with. So now this is like the consistency of like a I don't know, like a mousse. That'll definitely work. So these smaller potatoes are now done cooking. The larger ones are still cooking, so hopefully they'll be done as we work on these. I'm going to run these under cold water, and then peel the skin off and run them through a potato ricer. If you don't have a potato ricer, my recommendation would actually be to mash them with a potato masher and then use like a hand mixer to really blend them up really well. These really need to be really nicely reduced to a really smooth, consistent consistency. And so for the potato ricer, we just put potatoes in and squeeze them through. As I say, if you don't have a potato ricer, this is one of the few pieces of kitchen equipment that will totally change your life. You definitely want to get one. This just makes your life so much easier. It's not even funny. This is great. So I'll be back as soon as the larger potatoes are processed, and then we'll move forward. So here we have the potatoes. I'm going to add 110 grams of starch, and it's worth noting you should always cook a little more potatoes. So I cooked, between like 900 and a kilogram, just because there will be like some bad spots or things that you want to remove. We're going to stir this in, and then we will stir this in with the egg and basically salt it to taste. So I'll mix this up, and oh crap, that wasn't so good. So now I've mixed this up, we have kind of a nice dough here that's formed, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let this cool for a few minutes, and then we'll go ahead and also get the sauce and the water started for the Zeppelins. So just like the other Zeppelins, I'm going to start off with a decent size, like maybe tennis ball size chunk of dough. I'm going to flatten it into a pancake and then kind of curve it up. Now normally with the other Zeppelins I would have like a ball of batter, but I don't have that here. So I'm going to stir the I'm going to scoop the filling in here, and then close the top. And again, these do need to be sealed, which makes this a little bit difficult. If you have a little difficulty, you can take just a little more dough and plug any holes. And then, as before, wet hands can be used to smooth and seal. Now for the water, while it's cold, we always want to add cornstarch. That'll help keep these from falling apart. So I've put my my chopped onion in the butter schmaltz, and I'm frying it. And once it starts to get kind of translucent, I will add the mushrooms, and I'll just cook them down quite a bit. Now I've decided to make a change in that I was thinking about thickening the sauce with starch. But since I may be reheating the sauce several times, I decided that it would be better to thicken it with the rest of the fresh cheese, which you can also do. So I will be using milk and the fresh cheese for the base of the sauce, and since I have some of the extra filling, that filling is mostly cheese with a little egg, that can go in the sauce also. To thicken it. So we'll go ahead and go that direction instead. Now the onions are cooked a bit. They're starting to get nice and translucent. So I'm just going to toss in the mushrooms, and we will cook these down. I keep stirring it occasionally. I'm going to salt it now, just a bit of salt, and stir that in. I'm a big fan of salting most things early. So we're going to go ahead and let this cook for a little bit longer, and then we'll be ready to start cooking the Zeppelins. So since these are pretty well cooked down now I'm going to pour in my milk, and I'm going to start to spoon in the rest of this curd filling. And since the curd filling still has some egg in it, we really need to stir it in quickly. And we need it to mix while it's still not boiling. Otherwise it will curdle, and that wouldn't be fun. So from here, if it gets too thick, we can add more milk, and if it's too thin, we can add more cheese. Still a little bit on the thin side. I'm going to add another nice dollop of cheese. And this is starting to look nice and thick. So, here is our sauce. And it's thick enough that probably when I reheat it, I'll add a little bit of milk. On to the Zeppelins. So usually what I would recommend at this point is with a slotted spoon or a spider or something, just lower these into the boiling water. And since these are already like fully cooked, you're not going to cook them for as long, only maybe 5 minutes. So I'm going to start with just 2 here, and I'll be back in 5 minutes and we'll take them out. And so now it has been 5 minutes, so very carefully lift them out and onto the plate. And just like traditional Zeppelins, I'm going to let these sit for about a minute before I do anything else. And then we'll be back to add the sauce and decorate. So I have now put these on the plate, and I'm going to ladle some of the sauce over the top, and make sure that there are nice amounts of mushrooms on the sides and on the top. You can then maybe put some nice celery leaves or something on the top to give it a little bit more color, although these celery leaves are a little bit light. So anyway, here's what we have. Virtu, Bulviu, Cepelinai. And now for the taste test. Just try a bit of this mushroom first. I can't resist. That's really good. So these have a completely different texture, I can tell right from the moment the fork goes in, than sort of the traditional Zeppelins. The texture of the dumpling itself is much, much more like mashed potatoes, or the Cepelinai, which I've done in the past, which are fried. The curd filling just kind of melts away and becomes another part of the sauce. But man, these are good. I could eat these all the time. They're really, really, really good. The texture is much more like a bowl of mashed potatoes, and much less like a chewy potato dumpling. The sauce, the filling inside just kind of melts into the sauce, and it's really quite something. It has a wonderful, just kind of slightly tangy taste to it from the cheese. It's really, really good. I could eat these all day. Now, if you like this content and you find it useful, I hope that I've earned a subscription from you. Please also make sure that you've clicked the bell so you get notifications when I make new videos. Also, I use the comments, likes, and views to determine what you folks want to see more of. So you can participate in that process. And I'd like, in particular, to invite people to use the comments to offer suggestions, not just for what you'd like to see me make in the future, but also maybe tips for cooks trying to make the same dish, things that you think maybe might be improvements to the cooking techniques that I'm showing here, partly because when I make a video, very oftentimes I'm making certain compromises for the sake of being able to get the camera into the right place or things like that. So these sorts of suggestions are helpful to anybody watching my videos to cook these dishes themselves. On top of that, I would just like to say bon appetit and see you next week.